Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Cabinet Member for January 2026. I have a couple of practical issues to highlight first. We have no fire drill planned tonight, so if there is a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion as guided by staff. People with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the left-hand side as you leave the council chamber near to the balustrade, where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors either side of the council chamber, to the left and to the right as you leave. And this meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. Item 1, apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Giles. Item 2, declarations of interest. May I ask, are there any declarations of interest? I believe there are for all Cabinet members. Could you explain, Rob?
Thank you, Leader. So the monitoring officer has granted a dispensation for all members so that they can take part in this, and this covers the other meetings that we had at council, so that they can make decisions on local government reorganisation.
Thank you, Rob. Item 3, public questions and petitions. We've received no public questions or petitions. Item 4 is questions to Cabinet members. We've received 3 urgent questions from members. The first is from Councillor Oliver. Councillor Oliver, would you please ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is that we have an elections team employed year-round for the purpose of organising local elections on a yearly basis and maintaining the records that we need, with the funds for running these elections already budgeted for every year. The argument for the delay in the local elections in May 2026 has been based on capacity. Can the Cabinet member or yourself please explain how it was concluded that the existing capacity of the elections team will be unavailable for May 2026 elections, or would you agree that actually this is a politically motivated decision taking account of the sinking poll rates for the Labour Party both locally and nationally? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. As described, considerable allocation of senior officer and support services resources have already been dedicated to developing the proposal for unitary authorities, and it is anticipated that this resource requirement will continue to increase during the transition period. The organisation of elections similarly requires significant input from senior officers and support services. This need has been accounted for, and the returning officer is confident in the ability to deliver the election as scheduled. Nevertheless, postponing the elections until May 2027 would allow these resources to be redirected towards supporting local government reorganisation. Councillor Oliver, do you have a supplementary, please?
Yeah, I would just question, has the administration approached national government to ask for extra resource, because we all know how important local elections are, and you know, what members of the public will be thinking if we haven't tried every possible way that we can in order to maintain the democratic cycle.
There are no additional resources available from central government. And what I would say is I think that the original question, I think, is framed the wrong way round. So, of course, we budget for the provision of elections annually here. What we haven't budgeted for is local government reorganisation, and I think that's the crucial point here, that we're looking at that resource that's needed, the additional resource needed to ensure we can implement local government reorganisation effectively. Councillor Harper.
Chair, with your permission, I'd just like to add a little bit of context there. Obviously, we're going through the process of setting budgets at the moment, and just to offer a little bit of context, we're targeting £1 million worth of contingency so that we can fund local government reorganisation, which is something that we are required to do by government. All district councils, indeed all county councils, have been told that they must fully fund local government reorganisation out of existing resources. So I just wanted, I think it's important to be clear about the quantum of that resource in financial terms, as well as the resource terms that you've already set out in your paper that will follow.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Councillor Harper. I'll move on now to the second question. This is from Councillor Knight. Councillor Knight, would you please ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. The Equality Impact Assessment identifies that the electorate will be adversely affected by postponement of elections, especially underrepresented groups such as ethnic minorities, young voters and disabled people who may perceive reduced democratic participation. It is hard to believe that communication alone can mitigate these adverse effects when postponement of elections creates a perceivable reduction of democratic participation to these groups. How will the Council ensure that the electorate doesn't lose faith in our democratic system?
Thank you for your question. We understand and respect the concerns about the electorate not having the ability to cast their votes in 2026 and recognise the importance of maintaining trust and confidence in the democratic process. However, this is a delay of only 1 year, if agreed, which is well precedented as part of a transition between authorities and the full all-out elections to the new unitary authorities, which will go ahead in 2027, which is where our focus needs to be. Councillor Knight, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Our Council's response to the consultation on unitary proposals for Norfolk and Suffolk mentioned democratic deficit 5 times. Are we not aggravating the democratic deficit by reducing democratic participation?
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Well, I think it's rather curious that the Green Party are now so concerned about a delay of a year for the election of 1/3 of the councillors, and that being a democratic deficit, which is clearly of the highest priority to you, when only 2 years ago you proposed to Budget Council that there should be a move to 4 yearly elections. So all up elections every 4 years, the electorate being denied the vote for 4 consecutive years. You didn't seem to think that was so important then. Now, all of a sudden, it seems to be the highest priority for you. I think that's a huge contradiction on your part.
Sorry, point of information.
I'm sorry, you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. Sorry. So I just think that in terms of the Green Party, it's a huge contradiction. And I think you actually need to explain to the electorate why you have done a U-turn, when that happened, why it happened, and why you no longer believe in 4 yearly electoral terms. It's hypocrisy.
Sorry, Chair. The Council may make a point of personal explanation if they want to, but it will only be to correct a fact if it's inaccurate and if it's said.
Thank you. I was not elected yet, so I don't think that my opinion here and my questions here are directly reflecting my colleagues' opinions from 2 years ago.
I'm sorry, I assumed you were speaking on behalf of your party. Terribly sorry if that's not the case, so you're speaking on behalf of yourself. Okay, thank you very much for that. No, that's fine. I'll now move on to Councillor Stootley. Would you kindly ask your question, please?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to ask questions today. I think on the previous question, the issue is about schedule of elections and cancelling the schedule of elections rather than the cycle itself. And I believe we'll be moving to a 4-year cycle in the future for the new authority. Anyway, my question, please. The Local Government Association's guidance on the pre-election period makes clear that it is guidance on conduct and communications rather than a statutory ban on council business, and that councils routinely continue decision making during this period. Can the leader explain why, in this case, the pre-election period is being treated as a decisive constraint on local government reorganisation rather than something to be managed through established governance arrangements? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stootley, for your question. In the pre-election period, members naturally turn the majority of their focus and resources to canvassing and campaigning to get elected. Nowhere have I said that the pre-election period alone is a decisive constraint on LGR. It is just one of many factors outlined in my report. I will refer to the section in the report which is this one topic. Quote, prior to any election, the Council observes a pre-election moratorium period, imposing restrictions on its activities during this time. Only regulatory committees convene and make decisions. It is anticipated that the Secretary of State will publish a minded to decision regarding local government reorganisation in March, which will coincide with the pre-election period. As a result, neither Cabinet nor Council meetings are scheduled during April and May, potentially affecting the Council's capacity to participate in decision-making following the minded to decision, including contributions to the drafting of structural change orders. If the elections were postponed, there would be no requirement for a pre-election moratorium. This would allow additional meetings to proceed, ensuring members of Norwich City Council can contribute to the process and mitigating risks for the delivery timeline, unquote. Councillor Stootley, would you care to ask, please, a supplementary question?
I would, thank you. Okay, so the question was about and included the guidance which doesn't preclude activity and even decision making through the process. Could the leader clarify whether this council considers the pre-election period to be a legal barrier to decision making, or whether postponement is ultimately a discretionary judgment about convenience and risk?
So, I think the first thing is clearly that postponement is a decision of the Secretary of State, so we're not being asked to make that decision here today, of course. And I think also in the report, there's a kind of a jigsaw, a patchwork of different issues which impact on the ability to deliver LGR. The pre-election period is one of those. I would say it's not the most important by far, but it is a factor. So, thank you. We'll now move to the minutes. Can we please confirm that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting held on 3rd of December 2025, including the exempt minutes? I see a second. I'll propose seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous. Okay, we'll now move on to the consultation on local government election delay May 2026. This item is contained in the supplementary agenda. Could I ask members do not repeat questions that have already been asked and answered? That would be extremely helpful when we get to that point. So, Cabinet, on the 18th of December 2025, the Minister of State for Local Government and Homelessness, Alison McGovern, wrote to council leaders regarding the timings of scheduled elections. The letter invited local leaders to set out their views on the postponement of local elections with representations required by the 15th of January 2025. Constitutionally, this is an executive matter, therefore not a matter for full council, and I would have been fully within my rights and powers to have replied, setting out my opinion without any consultation. However, given the significance of the question and the public interest, I decided to bring the matter to a Cabinet meeting so that it can be discussed in public and leaders of the opposition parties given the opportunity to comment. And Cabinet, I want to be clear that the Minister has not asked us to make a decision on whether the elections go ahead. That is a decision for the Minister. We are being asked to express a view on whether the capacity exists to deliver both elections and LGR effectively. This is a finely balanced consideration. There is no right or wrong answer, but nonetheless it is a view we're being asked to express. Cabinet, Norwich City Council is enthusiastic about devolution and local government reorganisation. We are 100% committed to making both a success, enabling them to become the vehicles for the delivery of the government's key priorities of delivering better public services and economic growth. In September 2025, we made a proposal to MHCLG in partnership with 5 other districts for a 3 unitary council solution for the county, which includes an urban Norwich unitary council on extended boundaries. These 6 districts, including Norwich, are controlled by Labour, Liberal Democrat, Conservative and Independent administrations. This is an incredibly strong cross-party partnership. We all recognise that whatever the decision of ministers on the future shape of local government in Norfolk, we need to retain this strong partnership approach to ensure both LGR and devolution across Norfolk are a success. We also recognise that the work of establishing the MCA and the new unitary council or councils and transferring powers, responsibilities and services to them whilst maintaining existing services in a safe and effective state will be the main priority over the next 2 years. This work will require all the resources, experience and knowledge at our disposal. It will be crucial that it is based on a foundation of stability and a lack of anything that dilutes our focus while we deliver this complex and demanding project. The project will contain work streams to wind down existing councils, safely transfer services and functions to the new councils, and stand those councils up to be safe and effective from day one. Each of these work streams will be extremely complex to deliver and will contain thousands and thousands of individual actions. There will be intensive work involving officers throughout the affected councils. Close political oversight will be necessary because, as the opposition is fully aware, elected councillors will be held to account for the effective delivery of the change. This work will need to be delivered in addition to the day-to-day operations of the council, that is, the delivery of vital day-to-day services that we rely on. That in itself would create barely containable capacity pressures. But on top of that, we have an ongoing service improvement agenda which we are committed to continuing to deliver for the people of the city. We have made major strides in service improvement and we are fully committed to continuing this work, not least so that we can hand over these services to the new unitary council in the best possible state of quality and performance. We intend to strive to maintain and improve the quality of our services right up to the last moment of the City Council's existence. There will be no gradual withdrawal. We will be here fully engaged right up to the last moment. In addition to that will be the detailed work already alluded to of preparing services for transfer to the new unitary council. Specifying, quantifying, disaggregating, aggregating, comparing specifications, terminating contracts, combining contracts, transferring contracts, the list is endless. The same will apply to council budgets. In addition, there will be significant human resources challenges and the need to treat staff affected by the changes with care, fairness and dignity. These are major pieces of highly detailed work involving thousands and thousands of tasks, as I've said, much of them inter-organisational. And finally, there will be the task of gradually closing down the council and switching off the lights in 2028. The demands on the council's capacity cannot be underestimated. At the best of times, these changes will be a major challenge. But, Cabinet, we all know that from 2010 to 2024, this council's budget was reduced by 70% because of Tory austerity and funding cuts. During this period, thanks to excellent financial management by successive Labour administrations, we have maintained a strong balance sheet, but have had to make enormous efficiencies consistently, year on year, in order to achieve this. Put simply, there is no more slack in the system, and facing this major LGR and devolution workload challenge is the straw that could break the camel's back. And while we now know that the Labour government is taking steps to restore our core spending power under the Fairer Funding Review, that cannot happen quickly enough to impact us before next May. Difficult choices are going to have to be made, and the government has made it clear to us that delivering devolution and local government reorganisation are the very highest priorities. Cabinet, we currently are in what I might best describe as the calm before the storm, as we await the Secretary of State's decision on LGR boundaries. When that decision is received in March of this year, it will fire the starting pistol for a tsunami of work, including preparing for the shadow unitary council elections in 2027. From that moment, the focus will be on the new unitary council, and very quickly, the government will place restrictions on the powers of the city council as it prepares for abolition. By 2027, we'll be unable to make any significant decisions without the consent of the shadow unitary council, The job of the administration here will be to maintain services, safely transfer them and move the organisation to closure. This tsunami is a lot closer than many seem to realise, and I do notice many on the opposition benches, not all, but some, behaving as if none of this is really real or about to happen, and conducting business as usual. This type of denial is not unusual in these circumstances. I've seen it many times before. But I'm here to tell you that it is real, and the tsunami of change is about to hit, ready or not. In that context, many council leaders have been concerned about the possibility of local elections being held in May 2026 and adding an additional burden to already stretched resources, which is why the Minister has written to all of us asking for views on capacity. This request has, of course, been made in the context of many precedents for the deferral of elections immediately prior to elections to new authorities, as part of the restructuring process, going back at least as far as 1974. Indeed, in 1974, new councils were created, including the creation of the new Norwich Metropolitan District Council. Elections for the new council's shadow year were held in June 1973, meaning there were no elections to the predecessor body in that year. This is pretty much what is being proposed now. There are also plenty more recent precedents. In 2021, 247 local elections in Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Somerset were cancelled due to transitioning to unitary authorities. This also happened in 2018, when Dorset, Buckinghamshire and Northamptonshire also had elections delayed due to similar reorganisations. So and I would say rather hysterical idea that it's being mooted, that this is an unprecedented response and is primarily a reaction to perceived political circumstances, is clearly not evidenced. The reality is quite the reverse. This is perfectly normal in such circumstances and well precedented. Cabinet, I understand the importance of local democracy and maintaining public trust and confidence in it. In particular, I've had constructive discussions with the leader of the Liberal Democrats and fully understand their position. But it's our responsibility to reach a view about the impact on capacity, regardless of how you feel about a potential democratic deficit, and I take that very seriously. We have been asked to form a view on the impact on capacity. In these very specific and rare circumstances, as outlined, I believe there is a compelling case for the delay of just 1 year from 2026 to 2027. Holding elections in 2026 would introduce uncertainty and instability, which could especially disrupt the LGR delivery process. Elections would redirect resources and would shift focus away from the project to the critical stage, right after the ministerial decision is made and just a year before shadow authority elections. At this juncture, we will be operating within very tight deadlines, meaning we should not put the project at risk by allocating resources to other activities or introducing ambiguity about who will oversee the process following those elections. In May 2026, we will be only a year away from elections to the new shadow unitary authorities in 2027 and 2 years away from the mayoral election in 2028. Deferral of the 2026 local elections to 2027 would represent a delay of only 1 year, set in the context of absolute certainty about when the next set of full local elections will occur. A delay of 1 year would guarantee essential continuity by offering a stable foundation for the transition from current to new administrative structures, maintaining critical partnerships and working relationships, and preserving the knowledge and expertise accumulated by those actively engaged in the process. I believe there is a very strong argument to be made that a delay of the 2026 elections to just is essential to keep the project on track and on time at that crucial moment. I also believe it is important to repeat that in 2027-28, the final year of both districts and counties, their focus will have shifted to the safe and effective transfer of services and gradually closing themselves down. Although some councillors will have been imposed for an extended period, they will not at this point be making new major or strategic decisions, and the focus will be very much on the new unitary councils and the vitally important decisions they will be making in their shadow year. In Norwich in particular, only a third of seats are due to be contested in May 2026, meaning that only 1/3 of councillors would have their terms extended for a period of 1 year prior to major all-out elections in 2027. There is also in parallel the matter of the cost of local elections, by which I mean the financial cost, the use of officer time, and the opportunity cost of what else could have been done with those resources, at a pivotal moment in the local government reorganisation process. I believe, for the reasons stated above, that holding elections in 2026 would be an undefendable cost and could lead to a loss of resource and focus at a crucial time. In that context, and I'll refer to this again, I note that in February 2024, the Green Party opposition here at City Hall proposed a budget amendment to move annual elections in thirds to all-up elections once every 4 years. The justification for this was, and I quote, "the council can make savings if it were to switch to 4 yearly elections," unquote. Labour opposed this change. In all normal circumstances, we believe in annual elections to ensure parties campaign all year, every year, and that the public has a regular vote. So, in the face of our opposition from Labour, the Greens ultimately dropped their proposal. However, I fail to understand the logic of a party which just 2 years ago proposed to deny voters the right to vote for 4 consecutive full years on an ongoing basis, now making such a fuss about the deferral of one election of just a third of the seats for 1 year only and just a year prior to full-up elections for the new authority, particularly when that is very well precedented, is in fact normal practice. That smacks to me of hypocrisy, populism and opportunism. I would again stress that we are not deciding here whether the elections go ahead. That is the Secretary of State's decision. We are being asked to express an opinion to the Minister. In making that recommendation, we fully recognise the importance of local democracy and regular local elections in order to maintain public confidence and trust in the system. However, in these very specific and very rare circumstances, and with strong prior precedent and a major once-in-a-generation change to the structure of local government to deliver, I believe recommending a pragmatic and modest delay of 1 year prior to the full all-up elections to the new Unitary Council in 2027 would deliver the focus, the resources and the continuity of leadership to ensure the success of this most important government priority. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hampton, thank you. I will now move to questions from group leaders and the ungrouped member, Councillor Davis, who is with us. So first of all, Councillor Galvin, can I start with you, please?
Thank you very much. Councillor Stonard, thank you for the report and the presentation around it, and the opportunity to have a slightly different meeting and ask questions. It's much appreciated. We're all sat here in this chamber because the people of Norwich have elected us, and rightly in a democracy, they're not just an administrative task. I just want to introduce my questions slightly. They're how residents judge us, what we've done, what we plan to do, and crucially how we listen to them. So in a time when many feel unheard, guarding that legitimacy is solemn work, as I'm sure you'll agree. Any move to delay a vote must be justified by evidence and done by the whole council, which is how it would have been done in any Green proposal, which was supported by a lot of members of the Labour Party actually at the time. You referenced that. So not convenience and not just a lot of words. And it must be done in a careful, timely and evidence-based manner. There's just 1 day before the answer is required by government. We were asked about this the day before the Christmas break. We got no answers from the leader, despite repeated questions for weeks. So I make no apology for the 7 questions which I have here, which are all important. Because this has been my only chance to ask them. So the first question is, Norfolk County Council have publicly stated that they do not wish to apply for postponement of county council elections, while Norwich City Council has been painfully silent thus far. Has the Cabinet member or the leader been in contact with the County Council to discuss the absurd eventuality of Norwich City Council seeking to avoid democratic legitimacy while still having to run county council elections that have already been postponed once in 2025? I don't know if you want me to read the questions or...
I think we should probably take them one at a time, or we're going to get confused, which some might think would be to my benefit, but let's do this properly and answer each question separately. I mean, the first thing so effectively, the question is, have I had a conversation with the leader of the County Council about her position? Yes, okay. So the answer to that is yes. I have had a conversation with the leader of the county council, and I discussed with her what position she was likely to take, and she made it clear that she wouldn't be asking for the elections to be deferred. At that point, it wasn't clear what we would be doing. And just to rewind to an early section of your question, just to provide more context, we weren't expecting to get the request from the Secretary of State. It did come completely out of the blue. And the first thing that I had to do was to try and make sense of what it was we were being asked, and also the governance around that, because the question suggested that I was being asked to give an opinion, which I'd not been asked before in that way. So, formally asked. So I needed to understand exactly what that meant. And rather than act in haste and make a statement one way or the other, I took time to try and understand what the position was. In the middle of that, Christmas and New Year occurred, and I was away and not available, but the minute I got back on the 5th, I got back onto it. As I say, it's unusual that we are being asked to make a representation. Normally, the government makes that decision, and my expectation would have been that the government would have made that decision on our behalf. The Secretary of State wouldn't, but on this occasion, they've chosen not to. When I say that, they will ultimately, if it's necessary, make a decision, make the decision, but they're asking for our views. And the other thing is, I mean, it says in your statement, I'll just to refer back to this, that the opposition has been denied sight of the content of the report in advance of the meeting, and clearly the report was circulated. Because of the timescales involved and the amount of due diligence that needed to be done before writing the report, it wasn't possible to circulate it any earlier than it was, but you did have sight in advance of the meeting, and I would say you did actually have sight of the final report about the same time as me. I think just important to clarify that. In brief, the answer to the report is yes, I do speak to the leader of the county council. I have had a conversation with her. I need to have another one after any decision is made today, so that we fully understand one another's positions, but I'm not expecting her, based on the conversation I've had, to make a representation to the Secretary of State for the deferral of elections.
Thank you. The second question, just to clarify on that, your point there is a point of information. When I wrote in my statement that I hadn't seen the report and I had to write the statement for it, I hadn't seen the report. It was in draft. I was told by officers it was in draft, but I couldn't see it. So I was in the unusual position of writing a statement to be included in a report I hadn't seen. So that's what I was referring to, and that is what happened. That's a fact. I'll go on to question 2. The report states that postponing elections would release essential capacity for local government reorganisation. What specific quantified evidence can the leader provide showing that holding the May 2026 elections would make the delivery of reorganisation unachievable rather than more administratively convenient? I know we've had the figure of 1 million, but I'd like to see. That sounds like a contingency figure. I'd like to see a breakdown. I'd like to see some information about where that actually comes from.
Yeah, the £1 million has been identified as the potential that we might need in order to deliver local government reorganisation. And I mean, clearly, as I outlined in my introduction, the amount of work that will be needed in order to deliver it, particularly in the context of 14 years of austerity, is potentially and probably actually very damaging in terms of capacity and our ability to deliver the entire agenda. As I say, we're going to have to deliver essential day-to-day services. We're going to have to run down the authority, but also I mean, the really big task, and that's why we've identified £1 million, the really, really big task is looking at all those functions and services, and there are many, as you know, and all the contracts that we have, disaggregating them and then reaggregating them on the basis of whatever unitary structure the government alights upon and approves. That is a huge amount of work, and you know, and given that we aren't, as we've heard and we know, we aren't going to receive additional resource from the government, we have to find that resource from within the council. And so one of the clear areas, and it's not just financial, it's also human resource, it's officer capacity. We need to be able to focus that effectively on LGR. And I think there's a sort of pragmatic view that the resource that would go into elections, human and financial, could be redeployed to support LGR. But also that resource is something which in normal circumstances we wouldn't have to deploy, because in normal circumstances we wouldn't be having this discussion. The government would already have cancelled the elections, because that's what normally happens. So that resource is going to be really important, given that we may need to find up to £1 million to deliver LGR. If there is any other working in the background, if I can find that, I will share that with you after the meeting.
Thank you. So elections are a part of essential day-to-day services of the council, I'd say, because the services are delivered on a mandate from the public, and it'd be interesting to know where you draw the line of what is non-essential and not, in terms of what a democratic organisation does. But do you accept that asking sitting councillors to recommend the postponement of elections, which would extend their own terms, creates a perceived conflict of interest? And what independent safeguards have been put in place to ensure public confidence in this decision? Because I think that's why we're having this special meeting, because we're aware that it really is not a good look.
I mean, first of all, in terms of conflict of interest, you'd have heard that we all collectively declared an interest at the beginning of the meeting, and that interest is covered by a dispensation previously issued by the monitoring officer. So we have been absolutely upfront about that. I think in terms of public confidence, as I've said, fully understand the importance of the democratic process, of having regular elections and maintaining public trust and confidence in the process. However, these are times when we are in the process of transitioning from an old council to a new council. That council is not going to be able to exercise its powers over the course of the next 2 years in the way that it has in the past. In fact, it's going to be very much constrained and very much focused on the new unitary. And my message to the public is, we're not going to be making new strategic or policy decisions. We won't. So we won't be making huge changes. And that actually the focus needs to be the new unitary and building up to the elections for that new unitary, because that is the future. And that's where the big strategic policy decisions for the future will be made. And I think that's also what all the political parties are now gearing up to do, is getting ready for those really big elections in 2027 to an authority which is going to be here perhaps for the next 50 years, and it's going to be able to exercise all of its powers, which of course are considerably more than we currently have.
Thank you. Yeah, as you know, we've supported the new unitary, and we are fully on track to make that work as brilliantly as it can do for the area, for the city and its hinterland. It's just worrying what else LGR might be used as a reason to change, and I think you'll understand our concern that the two are being, if you like, conflated. this second consecutive year of denying Norwich residents a vote, it is quite scary, really, when you're used to having elections regularly. And I wondered how you find it aligns with the Electoral Commission's statement that capacity constraints are not a legitimate reason to delay elections.
So the first thing I would say is when you say what else might LGR be used as a reason to change in terms of fundamental democratic rights. I mean, I can't think of anything else that we would be planning to change. There's only one, there were only one more scheduled set of elections, and we're debating those at the moment. And the Electoral Commission advice, I've seen it and I've read it and understand and respect it. But nonetheless, the precedent is that when we are transitioning from one authority to another, and we have elections next year, and one of the councils is closing down effectively, that those elections are deferred. That's happened on hundreds and hundreds of occasions since 1974 at the very earliest, and maybe earlier than that. So I think the precedent is there. I think my response to the Electoral Commission would be, well, we need to, through our statements and the type of statements I'm making at the meeting today, we need to reassure the public that they will have their say, they will be able to take part in full all-up elections in 2027 for the unitary and 2028 for the mayor, and that is the future. This city council is not the future anymore. I don't think it's controversial to say that. Very soon it'll be the past. The future is going to be the unitary and the mayoral authority. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. I just think it's really important that we are very clear that that last year was an off year for Norwich City Council as well. Although Norfolk County Council elections were postponed, Norwich City Council was not due to have elections last year, although of course a number did take place across Mancroft, Bowthorpe and Sewell wards. So I just think it's really important that we are absolutely crystal clear about that, that there weren't any due to be taking place for City Council. Yeah,
so I mean, the point being that county council elections didn't take place last year, but it looks like they'll take place this year, whereas we were in a fallow year last year where we wouldn't have elected anyway. Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, Councillor Galvin, I don't know how far we've got. 6, are we up to?
We've had, I'm on question 5 actually, so a couple more, if that's all right with you. Mm-hmm. It's helpful to have the answers. So the returning officer confirms that the 2026 elections can be delivered as scheduled. I'm interested in why you've concluded as a cabinet that postponement is preferable to other capacity solutions, such as temporary staffing or external support for reorganisation work.
So, thank you for that. I mean, the first thing is, of course, as I said earlier on, in an earlier response, that clearly the provision of the elections in 2026 is budgeted for, of course, and that money is in the budget. The benefit of a delay would be that that budget could be transferred and used to support LGR delivery. And I think in terms of redeploying services or resources from elsewhere in the council, as I said earlier, we know that we've lost 70% of our resource in the period from 2014 up until the latter days of the previous Tory government. 70% is an awful lot. We've hollowed out the organisation while striving to maintain frontline services. And I think we all know, those of us who are councillors and officers know that we are operating really at minimum levels at the moment. So the idea that we would be able to transfer existing resources, the question would be, what is it we're not going to do in order to support LGR? What is it about the current services and functions that we provide? So that's why really we're looking to obtain additional resource. The benefit of that, which is a byproduct of the delay of the elections in 2026. In terms of external resource, I would say, clearly the Green Party has set themselves against that very firmly, and we're very much held to account over the level of interim payments that we make. And so I think there's a political calculation there, clearly. But anyway, do go on, ask question 6.
Thank you. One of our budget amendments, which you'll clearly take a lot most of, was actually to add money for a fund for LGR to keep a fund to one side for it. So we do believe in keeping money aside for things that are important, which obviously is, we do struggle because of austerity. We all know that, but I do think we are a functional council that people vote for, and there's still residents out there that will still want to vote and still be part of democracy. We can't pause the whole show just because there's LGR. So we need to balance the two things, because if elections are postponed, major decisions on structural change orders, as you've said, asset controls, governance, design will be taken by councillors, but those councillors will be operating beyond their original electoral mandate, essentially. What democratic accountability mechanisms will be in place to ensure real legitimacy during this extended period, which, as we know, may go on, because this government has showed us that things change. Even this morning, something major has changed. So we can't be sure when we're going to get an answer on this. None of us knew that letter was coming just before Christmas. Given that we're going into a bit of a grey zone where we're really not sure what's going on, how are we going to be sure that those councillors are sitting in a legitimate way in this room and taking decisions?
Clearly, and again, there are precedents for this where terms are extended. Now, we're not in the position of some county councils where those terms would have been extended for, and the councillors won't have faced elections for many, many years. I know that is the case in some places, and I know that's something that people get concerned about. We're acting in good faith on the basis that we will hear in March the outcome of the LGR process, and that we will be start delivering and preparing for elections in 2027 at that point. I think if that were not to happen, we would have to, going forward, review the situation, and I think we would, of course, because we're making this recommendation in a particular context, and if the context changes, then perhaps we need to just have another look at it. But those councillors who remain, they have a democratic mandate, they have been democratically elected, and it is for only a third of the council, it is just a year, as I say, prior to a new unitary being elected. It'll be a period where those the functions and the the ability, the decision making around the policy and strategy will be greatly constrained. There'll be constraints on how much money we can spend above a certain level for revenue and another level for capital. I think I've heard it said 100,000 and $1 million. We won't be able to do anything like that without the approval of the shadow unitary. We're going to be significantly constrained. So I think in terms of the democratic deficit that you moot, I think actually we will not be a normal council undertaking normal business. We will be very much a constrained council, which, as I say, is managing the transition to a new unitary and closing ourselves down. And again, I would reassure the public that that is the case, and that there will be full all-up elections for the new unitary in 2027 in just 14 months' time.
Thanks for the reassurance, and I hope we can hold you to that. Other councils facing the same reorganisation programmes, including Southend, have decided to proceed with their scheduled elections, actually. And there are many, many examples. You gave examples of councils not having elections. There are just as many, if not many more, of elections still going ahead. And Basildon's decision to cancel elections prompted a real public backlash. So given to delays to the timetables are not unprecedented, and we've seen it with the mayoral elections as well, and there's no guarantee that it will proceed on time. Have we actually calculated the cost to public confidence and weighed it against this convenience? And in the light of your press statement referring to proceedings with elections, despite the cost, can you confirm that this proposal really is driven by objective capacity evidence and not by political concerns about the likely electoral outcomes?
Thank you for that question, the opportunity to respond to that. So 63 councils were written to. The latest, before I came into the meeting, I heard was that 20 were proceeding with elections, 27 had decided to recommend not to. And there will be more. If you add the 20 and 27, you get 47. So there's still some councils like ourselves to declare, as it were. But clearly it's a mixed bag, depending on local circumstances, but not apparently based on political stripe. So, no, we've seen Suffolk, a Conservative-controlled authority, which is specifically requesting a delay to the elections. We see Green-led Hastings, for example, have requested a delay to the elections, and we see Liberal Democrat-led Cheltenham requesting a delay to the elections. So there doesn't seem to be a particular pattern based on, for example, politics. It seems that each council is weighing this up and making their own decision based on their own particular circumstances. And clearly those circumstances will be different. Different councils are affected differently by austerity, for example. Different councils have got different levels of capacity. You only have to look around Norfolk and you can see it, that different councils, particularly those that aren't Labour, maybe survived a lot better during austerity than we did. In terms of this point which keeps coming up about what the election outcome might be in 2026, and whether or not, and it suggested both Labour and the Conservatives are kind of running away from the election. I just think, no one is running away from anything. And as I said previously, deferral of elections in the year prior to the replacement of a council with a new council is quite normal, and there are many precedents, as said. In fact, when this very authority was created in 1974, that's exactly what happened. Now, I would say the LGR project is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve local government in Norfolk and to address the current democratic deficit in the city, and there is, because the ruling administration of county has no councillors representing the city. There is a democratic deficit there, there's no doubt, and I know we will agree on that. And so we need to put all our efforts into getting it right. And I know there are national polls which suggest what the state of the parties are on average across the country. Now, national polls tell one story, but there's another story a bit close to home, and that's when you go door knocking, which we all do around the city, and I do, and you hear what people are saying about their voting intentions in Norwich. And guess what? The Labour vote in Norwich is not collapsing. It's holding up quite well. It's not as strong as it was last year, of course, but it's still holding up quite well. There's a lot of talk about people running scared of reform, for example. Well, last May we went head-to-head with reform in Bowthorpe and we won. That was despite the fact that reform were campaigning around the Asylum Hotel in the area, which created a lot of support for them. And of course, the Greens telling porky pies about being the main challengers and sort of sucking up votes to that dishonesty. And, you can't dispute this. There was a Green leaflet that said, we came second here last time, we are the challengers, which of course is just not true. Absolutely. You came third previously and fourth the time before. So Labour were the main challengers. And the Greens did benefit from that, but actually we still won. There was no reform landslide. There was no Green upset, tipping Labour out. And we know that since then, Reform's national standing has slipped. We know that. So, who knows what will happen tomorrow if there were to be an election, say, in Bowthorpe. I think it's also important to remember that no one knows what the outcome of any election is going to be. It is complex at the moment. I think if you're talking about reform again, they're just as likely to take votes from the Greens as they are from Labour. It depends which ward you're in. So I don't think any of us can be complacent or can assume what the outcome of the elections will be. But certainly we have nothing to run away from. And indeed, in terms of the Green opposition here and the prospect of Green gains, well, actually, we're disappointed in many ways because we think we might have won a couple of seats back from you in May. The reason for that is, you talk a lot about democratic deficit and democratic representation. At the last full council meeting, half your councillors didn't turn up. Those are people who are taking their allowances and are representing wards in the city, didn't bother to turn up, half of them. All the Lib Dems were here, all the Labour councillors were here. I think that's deeply embarrassing. And with all due respect, Lucy, I think you're doing a cracking job as interim leader, and I'm glad that you're there because you do the job very well and you hold us to account, and you can be really annoying, but that's your job, and I respect you for that. But you're interim, your group hasn't been able to elect a permanent leader. The last leader left whilst under investigation by standards. So, there really is division and chaos in the Green Group at City Hall. You're not a threat to us in that condition. You need to get your act together, but you're not a threat to us. We're not running away. We're the grown-ups in the room. We're making the hard choices. See, we don't think the City Council is a student union. We're making the hard choices and the hard decisions to ensure this LGR project, which is a rare opportunity to reform local government in Norfolk, is effective. And we have the experience and the knowledge to do that. And in terms of the Green opposition, I think, if the elections were to go ahead, I don't think we're scared of you at all, and we're not scared of reform, because we're doing a tremendous job. And we want, as the grown-ups, we don't want to make short-term decisions about short-term political gain. That's not what it's about. It's actually about getting it right for the next 50 years in this county for people. And if that means in order to do that, that the elections need to be deferred by 1 year for a third of the council prior to all up elections, that's the hard decision to make. That's the tough decision to make. But as I say, we're the grown-ups in the room and we're prepared to do it, and we will do it. And if it's controversial, so be it, because we're the adults in the room. So I'll move on now to questions from other group leaders. Councillor Wright, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to set out my views in the report that was published. That was really helpful. I think probably public feeling on this issue certainly has been exacerbated due to the lack of county council elections last year. So and my first question is sort of around that, and whether we could potentially end up with the perverse situation where the Minister, in agreeing to defer the City Council elections based on input from this Cabinet, might be minded to defer the County Council elections due to our capacity concerns and our role in delivering those elections, given that our officers are seconded from their usual roles during the election period. And I wonder if you think that might be a sort of domino effect of any recommendation that's made tonight.
I think that's a really good question. Now, my understanding is that in terms of the County Council, I don't want to speak on behalf of the leader there without her consent or without being sure I've got her consent, but my understanding, and this is heavily caveated for that reason, is that I think County are going to write setting out the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages, but they're not going to specifically ask for a delay. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong in that, if something has changed, forgive me, I'm just telling you my best knowledge at the moment. I guess there is a world in which, a universe in which the Secretary of State looks at that and looks at our representation and makes a decision, as you call it, a domino effect, to cancel both sets of elections. That's not within our power, and it's not something we're going to specifically ask for. We're not going to interfere in county elections. That's not our job, but I think there is a world in which that could happen.
Thank you. If I could just ask one other question, yeah. You've talked a bit about precedents in your comments so far this evening. Now, what has happened in this council before when there are sort of significant matters like this is that we've had a sort of rolling process where there's been some scrutiny. Scrutiny committee's met, it's then immediately put its recommendations to Cabinet, that's met immediately after it, and then full council's met after that. So we've done all three processes over a few hours on the same day. I had previously set out to you during this, in the last few weeks over this, that I felt that the scrutiny committee should have been involved in this process, and we could have helped with a view for Cabinet to be examining tonight. And I just wonder if you could maybe set out why that wasn't felt to be appropriate in this case. Thank you.
So, yeah, it was an option. It was something that that we thought about. One of the problems we had was the time scale. I'm trying to recollect what was happening just the week before Christmas and the week after. My recollection is that one of the issues was the timescales necessary to schedule in meetings, and because clearly if we want to call a meeting and there's a certain amount of time that we've got to allow, we had Christmas and New Year in the way. And indeed, the reason we're doing this tonight is because this is an already scheduled meeting. We just didn't have the time to organise an extraordinary extra meeting. So we determined, given that we've been given the deadline of tomorrow, that the most appropriate way to do it, and to make sure everyone who wanted to be there, needed to be there, could be there, would be to use an existing meeting date, which was already in people's diaries. I mean, it's not ideal, but on the other hand, if we tried to rush an additional meeting, that might not have been convenient for people, and there also were time constraints. So my recollection of the conversations, and I was having a lot at the time, is that that's why that was discounted as a possibility, but it was considered, James.
Thank you. Thank you for outlining the sort of timescale issue there.
Thank you. Councillor Davis. Sorry, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I really appreciate it. I've just got a couple of questions. One is actually just to follow up from James's question. So if we do need to run Norfolk's elections, if they decide that they will go ahead, where will we get the capacity from? What will happen if, as we've suggested, maybe the city ones don't go ahead, but the county ones still have to go ahead? What will happen in terms of capacity if that situation happens?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Obviously, we're not going to interfere in the county council elections, and we're here to make decisions for the city council. I hope very much that, whilst I don't want to interfere, that James's proposal or James's universe comes to be, because I think that would then make it very, very clear, whereas it might be a little bit more messy if the county council elections go ahead. So the hope is that the minister will make that decision. Although I'm not going to proactively intervene, that would not be appropriate.
No, it wouldn't be obviously for you to intervene in county, but they did promise that they'd only be deferred for 1 year. So I think we could be in a situation where we still have to run elections, perhaps on behalf of the county, but not on behalf of the city. So I just think it's something that needs to be looked at in terms of capacity, because this seems to be the main argument for writing to the minister, and we may be in a situation where we still have to find that capacity. But that was just basically a follow-up on James' question.
I think you're right, and I think the Secretary of State might well take that into account when looking at the decision that he makes about Norwich City.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. So I only have one question, you'll be pleased to know, and it's not about political polls. So, winner. So this is a question to Capri, Cabinet Member for Equalities and Social Justice. I wondered if you could explain how it was determined that A communications plan constitutes adequate mitigation in the equality impact assessment for the potential delay of local elections. And do you accept that the right to vote is a fundamental democratic safeguard? And if so, on what basis do you believe that a comms plan can compensate for the removal of that right, particularly for people with protected characteristics who are already disproportionately excluded from local decision making?
I'm happy to contribute to this as well, Gurpreet.
If you could take this mic, then I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so Karen, we've alluded to this already to an extent. It's very clear what the equality impact assessment says. We're discussing a delay of an election of a third of the council for 1 year prior to all up elections in 2027. I think in terms of those groups you're talking about, I think we need to, and I've been trying to do that throughout the meeting, communicate to them that this is just a minor delay prior to a big opportunity to vote in the 2027 unitary council elections for Norwich, which is what's going to make a big difference. I think so much of what I've been saying tonight feeds into answering your question, which is to reassure the public. I'll be out there doing that, depending upon how my colleagues vote. I'll be out there doing that and explaining that the real opportunity, the really exciting opportunity, is that we can all vote in the 2027 elections for hopefully a new Norwich Unitary Council on extended boundaries, which is, I know, what we all want, and that's what drives me. That's what I'm really, really working towards. So I think it's about providing reassurance and engaging, and that's certainly what we intend to do. And I think we will have to, because people will be asking us about it. Even if we weren't proactive, we would get asked the questions. So we're ready to engage.
Thank you. So it's around communications and it being deferred for 1 year. Everyone was told the county was going to be deferred for 1 year, and that doesn't seem to be certain. So what certainty is there for people? So the mayoral elections were cancelled, delayed out of the blue. Now the Secretary of State has written to 63 councils saying, put your stories forward, what do you want to do? We don't know if the county elections are going to be rescheduled. And I still don't think in the EQIA that a comms strategy is a mitigation. I think,
and what you're identifying, the uncertainty, and there is, particularly when, no, I won't finish that sentence. There is uncertainty because things do get delayed, don't they? And I'll go back to what I said earlier on. We're holding this debate in good faith that those elections for the new unitary in May 2027 will go ahead. If we hear that they've been delayed or deferred, I think, given that there would have potentially been a decision to defer the 2026 elections, I don't think this, it automatically follows that the 2027 elections for the City Council would not happen if the Shallow Unitary elections didn't take place. I think we would have to have the debate again. I don't think we would be right to let that roll forward without coming back here and having that discussion. Okay. Thank you for all the questions. That's been really helpful. I'll now move on to cabinet members. Oh, statements. So, would the group leaders, do you wish to make a statement? Lucy?
Thank you very much. So I'll reiterate that we're all here today because the people of Norwich elected us, because we're in a democracy, and this isn't just an administrative task. It is how residents judge what we've done, hear what we plan to do, and crucially, how we listen to them. So in this time when so many feel unheard, we have to really guard that legitimacy. We have to go the extra mile to make it very clear to people that we are listening. So any move to justify a vote, to delay a vote or postpone a vote, has to be justified by evidence. And I haven't seen the evidence I'd like to see in the report. It needs to be done in a really careful, timely and evidence-based manner. I haven't seen it as a careful or timely evidence process this. This is the day before the answer is required. I'm saying we didn't have enough time to organise a meeting. Didn't have enough time to do scrutiny, resorting to sort of personal attacks, and deferring everything to 2027 and assuring people that will happen. All of that's just not enough. It's what you do, not what you say. In politics, as in life, that counts, I think. So there are clear issues that really need to be addressed today when considering how to vote on this report. And I would just really ask Cabinet to consider these issues. And I'll try and be brief because I have raised them already. Their coordination and legitimacy. Has there been direct engagement with Norfolk County Council to avoid the scenario of one body delaying while another proceeds? And what's the plan to maintain legitimacy if positions diverge? It's clear that has actually happened, and it looks like we're being kind of used essentially as a convenient fig leaf for the county, unfortunately, I'm sad to say. Second is capacity versus necessity. There's a rationale that postponement is releasing essential capacity, but capacity alone isn't the same as impossibility. We need that necessity to be evidenced for residents. So I'd like to request a specific, quantified evidence showing that holding elections makes reorganisation unachievable, not merely less convenient. A conflict of interest means, we've said that postponement extends current terms, and we need urgently to know what independent scrutiny or safeguards are in place to maintain public confidence when incumbents are asking to extend their own mandates. And that's addressed very directly to Cabinet. The democratic impact and precedent. As we've heard, local elections have already been postponed once, and national guidance from the Electoral Commission has signalled capacity complaints aren't a legitimate reason to delay. The second denial of a vote heightens that cost. So we need to know what assessment has been made of that impact and how it aligns with established guidance. Feasibility versus the alternative. The returning officer has confirmed that scheduled delivery is possible. So I'd like to know why temporary staffing or external support was rejected, on what comparative analysis, and where was the figure of 1 million arrived at, that we've heard of. Lastly, accountability during those extended terms, so that this plays back to the other question really. People really will be acting beyond their terms, and we need to know what that democratic legitimacy is, because we still care about this council. I know it's coming to the end, but we still represent people. We were elected here to represent people. That's why we're here today. We can't let go of that. I will not let go of that. So I'd like to point out that some councils do plan to proceed. Others have faced the backlash after cancelling, and that timetables do shift, as we've heard, as you've acknowledged and said, that you will come back to us if it does shift. But how has the cost to democratic trust been weighed against this administrative convenience, especially as by-elections during that extended term could also cost? So they could cumulatively exceed the cost of a poll even. And have we modelled that? Is there a sensitivity analysis on that? I'd like to have seen that in the report. I know they were mentioned, but there wasn't any modelling done. So I really want to ask that this is demonstrated by actual capacity evidence rather than electoral outcomes. I don't want to get into a fight about who would win which election, because I really don't think it's about that. I think it's about doing the best for democracy as a topic, as a very important, precious thing that is under attack at the moment in our society. It's not a discretionary extra, it's the mandate we serve under. And I would request that those specific documents and analyses are published. That's the capacity modelling, the risk assessment, and the alternatives appraisal. And a timeline for decision making is published as well. And I would like clear answers. I know we're up against it because this answer is supposed to be going in tomorrow, but residents expect evidence. They expect independence, they expect accountability. And I think elections should be run unless they're demonstrably impossible. I'd like you to publish those analyses and the alternatives and the oversight plan for any extended terms and confirm the timelines. If you can't, I think the election should go ahead, and you should, in all conscience, on behalf of the residents of Norwich, relay that to the Minister.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin, for your statement. I now move to Cabinet Men. Oh, they do want. You do want to make a statement? Okay.
Thank you. At the heart of this is a simple principle. In a democracy, the right to vote at regular, scheduled elections is not an optional extra. It's the primary way people, especially those who are already marginalised, exercise power over the decisions that affect their lives. Around the world, we can see what happens when elections are delayed for administrative or practical reasons. Even when those reasons are initially presented as temporary or technical, delays weaken public trust, reduce participation, and normalise the idea that democratic rights can be set aside for convenience. Over time, people disengage, not because they do not care, but because the system signals that their voice is conditional. That damage isn't evenly distributed. It falls hardest on groups who already face barriers to political participation: disabled people, minority ethnic communities, younger voters, and those with insecure housing or work. For those communities, the ballot box is not symbolic. It's often the only direct leverage they have. So the issue is not about messaging. No communications plan, however well-intentioned, can replace the act of voting. No amount of explanation or reassurance compensates for the removal of a democratic choice. If we take our public sector equality duty seriously, we must ask whether we're reducing inequality or entrenching it by treating the loss of a vote as something that can be mitigated through a comms plan. Because democracy is not something you explain to people, it is something you allow and encourage them to participate in. Thank you, and once again, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. That's all right. Did you wish? No. Okay. Thank you.
So the only thing I will say is my statement is as per what I wrote in the report.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'll now move to Cabinet members to respond. Councillor Hampton, I saw your hand first, and Councillor Kidman.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take the opportunity to speak about my reasoning for why I'll be voting for the recommendation today, which probably will restate some of the important points colleagues have already made, and I'll pick up a few other comments that have been made so far in the meeting today and might need a bit of addressing. And firstly, just to highlight again, I think it's right and important that we are talking about this here today. As Councillor Stannard has said, it was well within his right to just reply to the letter without taking it into any public forum, but we're not going to hide from this. It's right that we have this discussion and are all transparent about what our stance is in public. So I'd like to thank Mike for firstly setting out his thinking on this issue today first, and also for giving the rest of the Cabinet the opportunity to contribute. We all have portfolios and insights about the capacity challenges we face within them, and cumulatively between us we have the strongest picture of capacity across the council, how that might be impacted, and it feels right that we all collectively agree and give Mike some backing on how he responds to the Minister. I do respect the comments made by Councillor Wright, especially about how ideally this might have gone to scrutiny too, but yeah, quite frankly, none of us knew this letter was coming before Christmas, or that this was the approach the government would be taking this time. So that process of understanding what governance mechanisms we have to, or in reality could choose to underpin this representation with, and then arranging that opportunity, that all had to be done at quite some pace over the Christmas period. And as Mike said, this meeting existed, so I think it's the best we could do in the circumstances, and it is good that we're having this discussion. But the issue at hand today is that Councillor Stannard is being asked by the Minister to provide a view on the postponement of local elections and whether this could release essential capacity to deliver local government reorganisation in our area, so to allow that reorganisation to progress effectively. and it can't be said enough times, but it will then be down to the Secretary of State to decide whether elections are postponed or not, and not us. Councillor Sonnard's already well articulated exactly how much work will need to go into progressing LGR in a way that protects the efficiency and safety of services, supports staff during transition, and puts the next council in the best possible position from day one, all at the same time as well. This isn't to be taken lightly, and clearly a huge amount of work has already taken place to date to make our submission, undertake the engagement around this, etc. We can't emphasise enough how this is really only the tip of the iceberg. As Mike says, it's for calm before the storm. Everything is about change, but nonetheless we owe it to residents not to let services suffer or to have to abandon service improvement, to make sure we end up with new authorities which will serve our communities for the decades to come. In my own portfolio, I have a mix of responsibilities that includes lots of services which we must and will maintain throughout LGR and to the very last day of this council existing at all costs, such as bin collections, clean streets, parking services, etc. And I also have more strategic, longer-term work which nonetheless still brings significant benefits to residents, for example, on the climate change side of my brief, and how we balance and prioritise these very important work streams throughout LGR is already a really daunting prospect, and there will be no doubt difficult decisions along the way, which will only be exacerbated with the more capacity restraints that remain in place for us. And there is no doubt to me that proceeding with elections in May would contribute towards this. I do fully appreciate that this needs to be balanced against other considerations, especially democratic ones. So on that theme, to say again, not proceeding with elections this May would mean 1/3 of sitting city councillors serving for 1 extra year. If the elections did go ahead, those councillors elected in May would serve half a term or slightly less than half a term even, I think, before this council ceases to exist. And during that term, there will be increasingly limited opportunities to be involved in strategic decision making, with powers becoming ever more restricted. And again, it's important to note that there will be all-up elections the very next year in 2027, so more seats than usual at that point in the electoral cycle will be elected at that time. As we've already heard, postponing elections in these circumstances is far from unprecedented. We've heard that last time there was such major reorganisation in Norwich in 1974, this was the case, but more recently, under the last government, between 2019 and 22, elections were postponed in Buckinghamshire, Cumbria, North Yorkshire, Northamptonshire, Somerset and Weymouth and Portland in very, very similar circumstances to what we're facing now. For those councils who are undergoing LGR and making the same considerations about how to respond to ministers' letters we are, again, like others, I checked the stats just before we came into this meeting, and at that point far more of those councils have stated that their view is that elections should be postponed, owing specifically to capacity pressures from those that haven't, and there are still some who haven't declared yet, or quite frankly a lot of them probably aren't going to declare, they're just going to send a letter, which we don't want to do. The pressure we're facing it seems to be shared across all these councils who've made a very similar call, and that's a lot of different colours of administrations across the country. And postponing elections in this way during LGR is far from an unprecedented occurrence. Not holding elections is never something to be taken lightly and should only be done in exceptional circumstances. So I am going to say it again, but that is why 2 years ago, when the Green Party proposed only having city council elections every 4 years, we opposed this. At the time, they simply cited it as a saving that could be made. So it's very difficult to hear their arguments now about postponing elections for 1/3 of councillors for 1 year at a time where there are exceptional circumstances, when they were willing to move to every 4 years just to save money. Don't get me wrong, the savings postponing elections will bring, especially in the context that Councillor Harper has already mentioned around the requirement to fund LGR from existing council budgets. This will help alleviate the resource and capacity issues faced, but it's by no means the only consideration either. But just to wrap up, there is a strong cross-party and cross-council mandate for LGR in Norwich and Norfolk, It's down to us to do all we can to make it a success, as its impacts are going to shape our city and communities for 50 or more years to come. This is absolutely not a decision that will or should be taken for short-term political expediency, and again, the decision will ultimately rest with the Secretary of State, but I support the recommendation of how Mike should be responding to that letter.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. I can see Councillor Kidman next. Off you go, and then Councillor Padder.
Thank you, Councillor Stannard, and I'll echo what Councillor Hampton said about being grateful for the opportunity to have this meeting. So thank you, and thank you everybody for their time this evening. I just wanted to add a few remarks. I value my right to vote. I respect people's right to vote. And when I speak to people in my ward, in the ward I represent, and they say they don't vote, it's always disappointing whether they're going to vote for me or not. We know how hard won the right to vote was for working class men and much later for all women. So I feel it keenly that people have a right to take part in democracy and that people do take part in democracy. It's disappointing that we're in the position we're in to have to consider deferring elections for 1 year, but I believe it's important to bear in mind that we are, and reiterate, that we're not alone. Many councils, as we've already heard, are looking at deferring their elections, and has already been mentioned, Greenload Hastings Borough Council just has announced that they are deferring their election. So it's not just Norwich, which goes to show that this is not a unique challenge we face, and of course it isn't, as Councillor Hampton just emphasised to us. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor Kidman. Councillor Padder.
Thank you. Likewise, thanks everyone for coming here this evening. So you were asked your opinion as leader to reflect on your time and experience as councillor for a period of austerity that predates me and others as councillors. You concluded, on balance, that deferring the election by a year to put the new council, or whatever shape it takes, on a firm footing for the next 50 years is the right one. I support this decision, but ultimately, despite the democratic process being undertaken here, the decision lays at the door of ministers. So they'll be weighing up all the evidence in line with all the other councils that have put their cases forward. On a minor point, comms plans, like all policies and plans, are only as good as the people they are designed to serve. We are duty-bound to ensure comms and engagement is effective and held to account accordingly, and that's to the question that was asked on comms plans earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. I can see Councillor Harper next.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I think I would want to associate myself with all of the remarks that my cabinet colleagues have made so far, and in particular, Councillor Hampton, I think as ever is calm, rational, and very compelling in the case that she makes. And in particular, I think I'd like to echo her thanks and also admiration for the role that you've played as council leader, Councillor Stannard, in not just getting us to where we are in terms of local government reorganisation, but really providing extraordinary leadership for Norfolk. I think to find such great cohesion actually in terms of the position that certainly the majority of the districts in Norfolk it took, and I know from speaking to colleagues in Suffolk that they also share that view, and people know that this isn't the first election disappointment I faced in recent months, and I like you, I am actually disappointed to be in a situation where we are I think moving towards recommending deferral, because actually, and I'm sure there will be an opportunity to discuss this in more detail at full council, but I do feel that we're in a very strong position politically, standing full square on our record, delivery of things like Anglia Square, Slowbottom Park, provisions market, the refurbishment of the halls, the livestock market, a renewed vision for East Norwich, St Saviour's Yard, warm homes, lots of things that unfortunately the opposition have chosen to oppose or try to frustrate. But look, the point I really do want to make here is, and we've heard some very earnest entreaties on the importance of voting and the importance of representation. And, you know, I think you rightly made the point about the embarrassing spectacle of only 8 of the official opposition turning up to a critically important council meeting. I mean, you know, they dismissively described it as rubber stamping, you know, in local media afterwards. You know, I absolutely agree with your view that, you know, it's not good enough. I just want to share a couple of other facts that, you know, kind of contextualise this, because I think it's important when we talk about respect for democracy. That point about representation is very important. It's been 476 days since one of their number have turned up to a full council. 476 days. Still claiming full allowance. Still turning up to another council body in Norfolk. But 476 days before they've managed to meet, since they've managed to meet their commitments to their residents in Norwich. I think that's unacceptable. Just to further emphasise the point, you've got to go back a full 16 months since the councillors from the ward that that particular councillor represents last managed to attend full council together. Again, all claiming full allowance, all claiming forward the responsibilities of being a councillor, whether it's for a district council, whether it's for a unitary, or whether it's for a county council. These are not things that we should undertake lightly. And if you're going to talk about respect for democracy and doing the right thing by local people, and those things cannot be underestimated, then I think it's really important that we look at this in the round. So, based on everything...
Councillor Harper, does any other Cabinet member wish to contribute? Councillor Jones? Thank you.
I think most of what I would have said has been covered very eloquently by my colleagues. I suppose for me it's about, yes, democracy is crucial, but also achieving a successful local government reorganisation. We're talking about a 1-year delay. This is about the future of our city and it having the right new authority that can function and deliver on the day it needs to, and that is too important for this city. I know with the work that we're doing in housing and getting it ready to hand over to whoever takes it forward, these are things that are people's lives and it needs to be right. And if this allows us and supports us to do that, I fully would endorse that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If there are no other comments from Cabinet members, in that case we move to a vote. The recommendation is in the report on the first page. Can I see all those in favour, please?
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous, thank you. I'd just like to point out it's 7:10. We've got the rest of the Cabinet agenda to get through. There is normally a 2-hour time limit and then an extension of an hour, which is at my discretion as I understand it. I'm going to suggest if people would like a 5-minute break before we continue with the business, would that be helpful for people? And then we'll carry on with the rest of the council agenda, if that's okay. Is that agreed? So we'll come back here 7:15. Okay, fine. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda. That is item 7. That is Climate Responsive Norwich Programme 2026 to 2035. Could I ask Councillor Hampton, please, to move the report? Thank you.
Thank you, and I know this has already been a long meeting, so I'm going to try to be as concise as I can and keep it shorter. I'll talk about some of the principles behind the programme rather than lots of the detail within it, but at the same time this is a big and important bit of work, and work has gone into it over a scale of years, so I'm hesitant to boil it down too drastically, so sorry, not sorry, but I'll do my best. But I am pleased today to be bringing forward our new Climate Responsive Norwich programme for 2026 to 2035, which will supersede our previous environmental strategy for 2020 to 25. The Council's Rio Norwich community-led plan was adopted in 2024, and this set out the Council's priorities, and it serves to underpin the budget setting process and essentially all that we do. This plan included a climate responsive Norwich as one of 5 key top-level priorities, which was a clear signal of how seriously we want to take this work and ensure it's ingrained in everything the Council does. And the Climate Responsive Norwich programme now sets out how this priority will be delivered. It will involve innovating and implementing affordable measures to quickly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, as well as ensuring communities and nature can adapt and remain resilient in the face of impacts of climate change, which unfortunately are already unavoidable, and all of this while aiming to deliver the social and environmental benefits which so often go hand in hand with climate action. And this Council does have a strong track record of delivering, leading and coordinating climate action in a way that serves to both cut emissions and deliver those benefits for residents, and I think it's worth recapping some of this quickly to help paint a picture of where we're starting from and what we want to build on. In terms of the Council's own operational emissions, since 2006, these have been reduced by 70%. We're currently delivering over £30 million of projects across our social housing to reduce emissions and fight fuel poverty, with a further £325 million set aside for future decarbonisation and energy efficiency improvements through to 2045. City Hall was retrofitted with a heat pump back in 2023, and last year we created the new Climate and Environment Directorate, bringing together the focus and teams needed to further accelerate work in this area. We've recently completed the installation of over 600 solar panels at Riverside Leisure Centre, which will significantly reduce energy costs and help ensure the long-term viability of this much-valued community asset. Looking at the city-wide picture, Norwich's direct emissions have reduced by 60% since 2005, which is shown in figure 4.1 in the papers, where it breaks down emissions per sector, and it also has that red dotted line showing how at the same time population had increased over this period. In 2015 we were the first UK council to run a reverse public auction for solar panel systems, enabling residents to benefit from getting solar installed at below typical market prices. This has seen more than 4,500 kilowatts of solar capacity delivered across the city so far. We're currently delivering £5 million of energy efficiency upgrades to keep private sector home warm, while cutting emissions and cutting bills at the same time. And we're strategically planning to decarbonise the city by, for example, promoting a £100 million citywide heat network for the city centre in East Norwich, as well as ensuring the city's electrical networks are future-proof for heat pumps, solar systems, EV charging, etc. And we've also commenced projects focused around biodiversity enhancement, including the Nature City Norwich project, after we were awarded £750,000 to develop a new collaborative partnership approach to planning nature recovery across the city. We're certainly proud of our achievements to date, but we remain ambitious for the future, and this is a programme that will allow us to be. It plots a positive pathway to meeting our local climate targets, while also being realistic about the challenges and limitations that lie ahead. We've pledged as a council to achieve net zero emissions by 2030 for council operations, and to aim for the city to be net zero by 2045, and this is what the programme will take us towards. It adopts a greenhouse gas protocol, an internationally recognised best practice standard to measure, categorise and report emissions, and that process is explained in much more detail in section 7 and throughout the programme. For both the council's emissions and the city's emissions, virtually all those emissions come from buildings and transport, so similar approaches can be used in each case to reach net zero. And electrification will be absolutely crucial. That is replacing fossil fuel consumption with low carbon electricity, so buildings replacing gas boilers with efficient electric heating such as heat pumps, and for transport replacing petrol and diesel transport with electric vehicles. The government's aim is for our national electricity system to be net zero by 2035, which means all existing or new energy consumption which is electrified becomes net zero by then. Nonetheless, there will still be a need to pursue measures to avoid using energy in the first place or reducing consumption where it is required to implement electrification affordably and make sure local and national electricity systems have sufficient capacity. So making buildings better insulated, promoting public transport over private vehicles, for example. The programme brings together or develops the work streams required to meet our climate commitments according to these ideas and principles. It will outline the scope of what's required to meet our climate commitments, and it acts as an umbrella encompassing 5 strategies, a mix of existing and ones that are being developed. This includes the already adopted biodiversity and sustainable warmth strategies, and then it requires the development of 3 additional new climate action plans, which will respectively cover the city, then the council's general operations, and thirdly the council's housing operations. Each of these new action plans will be accompanied by both a greenhouse gas mitigation plan and an adaptation plan, i.e. one plan of carbon reduction, but also including removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and then a plan to ensure that we are able to adapt to the impact of climate change as that happens, and which means we will need to pursue them regardless. And all the actions within this programme are scalable, so the tasks within it can be taken forward by a future authority, even if it's on an extended geography, should they choose that. So that was a bit of a top-level outline of what this programme aims to achieve and some of the principles underpinning it. There's lots more to read in the document, and there is a certain amount of technical detail because it's also written to serve as a guide for stakeholders who will also be able to take some of these actions forward. So otherwise, just to say thanks to Phil, the environmental strategy team, everyone else across the council who contributed, as well as external stakeholders for what's been a really brilliant piece of work. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hampton. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harper, thank you. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak? No. Okay, I'll move to questions from group leaders. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. And thanks to the officers for the report and strategy, which is comprehensive, especially the clear focus on electrification and the scale of the problem, which is really good to see. And there's a special mention for building, heating, decarbonisation into the Council's housing capital programme, only about 5 years after we first said it needed to happen. Really good to see that there. There are some things to take issue with or discuss, I guess, because we all have always taken a positive approach to this, not trying to point score or take very political views on it, but actually working together to do this important job of decarbonisation, because the delivery is in the detail. And thanks in advance for hearing me out on them, and we will raise them further with officers outside this meeting through other channels, obviously, and provide more details and ideas and share the thinking with you, and I hope that will be of assistance. For instance, the idea of a carbon removal programme that seems to be optional for the council and businesses and people to opt into. While we agree that land-based carbon removal, such as trees, is vital, that is already allocated to agriculture in the UK. Wide plans are not optional. There's a related point there about the lack of ambition around trees in the plan, which may be rectified later on, but at the moment speaks only of preventing loss rather than increasing tree cover in our city. Because increased tree cover is one of the best ways to reduce heat islands, so an essential part of both mitigation and adaptation. There's also a lack of considering what the council can do to lower land use emissions, for instance diet, which has huge impacts, as does aviation. Tricky, difficult one, but frequent flying is a massive emitter. Overall, we now actually need to focus our minds on the massive challenge, which is heating decarbonisation, as you point out, which requires a really steep, exponential growth. I would like to ask then if you can provide examples of your ambition as a cabinet member to support the uptake of clean heat technologies like heat pumps at pace, which would include landlords, the planning system, windows of opportunity that occur for the council to feed into batteries and energy flexibility alongside energy efficiency and solar. So just a few words on the priority of those areas would be good to hear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. Councillor Hampton.
Yeah, thank you for your question. And I'll pick up some of the comments made before dealing with that substantive question. Because there's some interesting points, but I think maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding of the scope of this programme. And to reiterate again, full action plans will be developed for work streams such as citywide, where some of this level of detail will end up sitting. So on the proposed carbon removal scheme, which involves planting new trees to remove carbon from the atmosphere, this isn't optional from the council. We've used tree planting previously, as reported, to sequester carbon. We now plan to lead an innovative citywide carbon removal scheme, which will be a national first. The scheme must be voluntary for businesses and residents because councils don't have statutory powers to mandate compliance with such initiatives. A citywide sequestration scheme will raise significant funds annually to plant new trees within the city, leading to greatly increased tree canopy cover. The council's tree management plan, which was adopted last year, does explicitly state that our aim is to achieve a 30% tree canopy cover from the current baseline of 17.4% cover in the lifetime of that plan. So this is a clear commitment to increasing tree cover, not just preventing loss. The programme does deal with food and aviation emissions, which are known as a city's consumption emissions, as part of the Net Zero Pathway for Norwich document, which will be publicly consulted on before the end of this financial year. And then in answer to your main question about ambition to support the uptake of clean heat, we are being supported by central government to develop a £100 million low carbon district heating network for the city centre to replace gas boilers in existing gas buildings and provide low carbon heat for thousands of homes. We are also supporting the development of other more local low carbon district heating schemes in private and social housing across the city. We currently have over £30 million in capital retrofit projects underway, delivering energy efficiency, solar and heat pumps in social and private housing. Annual heat pump installations have increased fivefold between 2020 and 2025, and the upcoming Net Zero Pathway document will set out actions and continue this exponential growth in clean heat uptake and help us meet our 2045 net zero target for the city. Numerous actions are already underway to support the delivery of our decarbonisation targets. We're working with the UK Power Network to ensure the city's electrical infrastructure is sufficiently strengthened for the electrification of heat and transport. And we funded the establishment of the Our Power Community Energy Company to improve engagement and uptake of renewable energy, which recently won £150,000 through the, and we recently won £150,000 through the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership to improve our information resources. The council is 100% committed to achieve net zero for the city by 2045 and will continue to innovate, be proactive and deliver exemplar schemes to meet this objective.
Thank you, Councillor Hampton. I will now move to vote. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you. I'm going to bring Rob in as acting MO as we've now reached the 2-hour mark.
Thank you, Leader. As we've hit the 2-hour mark and there are still questions that have been put by Councillor Gavin on the reports, I recommend that we don't take the items en bloc, unopposed, so that those questions which were served in good faith can be answered in, because we still have an hour left before the absolute guillotine clause. And due to officer availability, could I propose, put to you yourself and the Cabinet, that we go to item 15 to exclude the public so that we can hear item 16 and 17 and then return back to the item 8 and work through the remainder of the agenda.
I'm happy to do that. Are we happy to do that, Cabinet? Yep, just change the order slightly. Okay, so item 15, I will move that we exclude the press and public from the meeting during the consideration of items on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as specified in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, or it being confidential for the purposes of Section 100A2 of that Act. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kidman, all those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you. Sorry, Owen. Are you going to loiter out Item 8, which is the Equality Information Report for 2026. Thank you. May I ask, please, Councillor Padder to introduce the report, move the report.
Thank you. Thank you, members, also for feeding into this. I'm pleased to introduce the Equality Information Report 2026 and the accompanying update on our EDI action plan. Thank you to Nick Bodger and Joe Siggins, who have been instrumental in understanding the issues of some key elements of EDI and the production of this report. As you know, publishing the Equality Information Report is a statutory requirement under the Equality Act, Public Sector Equality Duty, and we must do this by the end of January each year. But this report is much more than compliance. It reflects our commitment to being evidence-informed and embedding equality and inclusion at the heart of everything we do. The report brings together equality data from our residents, customers and workforce and shows how we are progressing against key equality objectives. For the first time, it also integrates updates from the EDI action plan, giving a clearer picture of the actions we are taking across services to reduce inequality and promote inclusion. Since this report was considered by scrutiny in December, we've made a small but important addition, a paragraph highlighting our work to support people seeking sanctuary in Norwich. This reflects our ongoing commitment to creating a city where everyone feels safe, respected and able to thrive. Scrutiny provided overall other helpful recommendations which are set out in the report. If agreed, these will be embedded in the EDI action plan and reflected in future reports. We hope colleagues found the report insightful and agree that this report demonstrates real progress and a clear direction of travel. This report again has been reiterated a few times, so we welcome your approval to publish this year's Equality Information Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harper, I saw. Fine. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak? If not, we'll move to group spokespersons. Councillor Garvin, would you care to ask your question, please?
Thanks. In scrutiny of the item, the question was asked why we don't calculate the disability pay gap when we look at other pay gaps. And this was the minute from the Scrutiny Committee on this disability pay gap question. The answer was, in response to members' question about the disability pay gap, the Interim Director of HR commented that more needed to be done to understand the Council's profile through greater communication with staff as a starting point. Does this mean that not enough data is currently available to calculate the disability pay gaps and that greater communication is needed to encourage staff to disclose relevant information? And if so, how quickly can we make progress so we can then go ahead and start calculating the gap, which is clearly important?
Thank you, Councillor Padder.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin, for the question. I agree. There's the data. The disability pay gap is important data to capture. I think it's also important to highlight that we have currently an interim HR director who is essentially mapping out for her own information and for the new appointee who will be interviewing next week, HR and organisational director, to understand what the landscape looks like and what we need to be collecting to ensure that we continue down a path of making sure that the council is truly inclusive, and that includes understanding the disability pay gap and other pay gaps, including ethnic minority pay gap as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Padder. In which case now we'll move to a vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9, houses in multiple occupation policy and introduction of the private sector housing and HMO policy, enforcement policy frameworks. Excellent. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you. wish it wasn't quite so late in the day to do this one, but I'd like to propose the update to the HMO policy for approval following consultation, introduction of the private sector housing and HMO enforcement policy framework. We need to have clear private sector housing policies and standards, as these help improve housing standards by ensuring landlords maintain properties to legal standards, reduce hazards, improve living conditions. Also provide tenants with confidence that issues such as disrepair, overcrowding and harassment will be addressed properly. It ensures consistency enforcement so landlords and tenants understand their rights and responsibilities. It deals with risks associated with poor housing such as damp, mould and fire hazards. It demonstrates a commitment to safe, decent and affordable homes. And it deters criminal landlords. And there are criminal landlords, I think, need to be clear, but they're also good landlords, as clear penalties and enforcement actions discourage non-compliance and protect vulnerable tenants. The amendments to the policy are minor and technical in nature, and they don't change the intent or scope, but they ensure that legislative reference is accurate and up to date. The HMO policy has undergone a formal public consultation from the 10th of February until the 23rd of March. And we have private sector housing and HMO enforcement. We've introduced a comprehensive policy framework, and this ensures that the service is fully compliant with all its statutory duties and the national regulatory requirements. This framework provides clear guidance to officers, landlords, tenants, and ensures that our approach is consistent, transparent and enforceable. This includes a private sector housing enforcement policy, civil penalties, an electrical safety policy, and minimum energy efficiency standards policy. Alongside this, I think it's a really good opportunity to also update on a motion that I brought around protecting private renters previously, and previously brought an update to Cabinet on that before. But I think given how crucial this is to a significant number of tenants, residents in our city, I think I'm keen to just give an update, given it's a relevant topic. Since the motion was passed, a significant amount of work has been completed and further budget growth bids was agreed for this financial year 25 to 26 to enable detailed stock condition work to be undertaken as outlined in the motion that passed with such clear support from members across the chamber. Following this, we know that Norwich now has over 20,000 private rented properties, including an estimated 2,400 HMOs of all sizes, excluding dedicated student accommodation. The Council's ambition is to ensure that everyone has access to high quality homes. I have been and remain committed to making sure all tenants in the private rented sector can live in safe, decent and affordable housing, free from harassment and with the confidence to live their lives securely. Since joining Cabinet, my colleagues know there's always been an ambition to expand on the work we do in this sector and ensure that private renters are not ignored. This was far before this topic gained traction with others both locally and nationally. There's significant work being undertaken within this council to be in a position where we can explore and implement options as we work through this process. And I'm pleased we're now positioned to be sharing our progress with you. Over the past year, we've undertaken a thorough review of the data held in housing across the city. As part of this work, we've commissioned an in-depth assessment of the private rented sector and HMOs, focusing on stock condition and the pressures affecting both tenants and communities. Although the final report is still being completed, the emerging findings are already significant. The private rented sector in Norwich has expanded rapidly and now includes more than 20,300 properties. This represents a growth from 23% of all housing in 2011 to 29% in 2025. In most, 11 out of 13 of our wards, the proportion of privately rented homes exceeds the national average of 19%. Our private rented sector also contains a higher percentage of properties with at least one serious hazard compared with the national picture. We estimate around 2,286 private rented homes in Norwich present with at least one serious safety risk. Conditions in HMOs are even more concerning, with serious hazards estimated to affect over 20% of these properties. Despite clear underreporting, antisocial behaviour incidents linked to HMOs are 3 times the rate of other private rented homes. More than 10% of private rented homes fall into the 3 lowest energy efficiency bands, which is a particular concern given Norwich's higher than average levels of fuel poverty. Taken together, these findings show a substantial proportion of HMOs and other privately rented homes are not being managed to a standard that protects either occupants or wider community. As I previously stated, I and I know this council remains firmly committed to using its regulatory powers to improve standards across the sector. Once the evidence base is finalised, I intend to bring forward a report to Cabinet, setting out options for additional measures to be considered and for public consultation. At present, I'm pleased to be able to share this update with you and will continue to ensure that every step we take is evidence-based, with an overriding commitment to private rented standards being improved. And I will not be swayed from doing this the right way by any interested party, and whatever we do must work for tenants. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much for that, Beth. This is good progress. I have a wish to speak. Councillor Harper.
Just very, very briefly, just to congratulate Councillor Jones on this incredible piece of work and the officers team as well. And just, you know, I think it's worth, you know, it's a shame actually that this discussion is taking place, you know, pretty much in an empty room. But I just think that you know, it's important to pick up on Councillor Jones' final points. I think that the campaign of harassment that she has been subject to over the last 2 years has been absolutely shameful. And I think the fact that she has held her nerve to see this through, to do it in the right way, to do it in a way that is going to be enforceable, to do it in a way that's going to be, you know, legally sound is you know, absolutely, you know, kind of brilliant. And I think, you know, we've got, you know, I'm incredibly proud to be a cabinet member sitting alongside Councillor Jones for, you know, kind of all of the incredible work that she's done and will continue to do, you know, as we wind up Norwich City Council. But you know, I think just on behalf of the whole cabinet, certainly, and the whole Labour group, I think just recognising you know, the amount of bravery and grit she's had to demonstrate while we work through this process shouldn't be underestimated. So, you know, a whole, you know, heartfelt congratulations and thanks, I think. Adieu.
Thank you, Councillor Harper, and I'd like to associate myself very closely with those comments, as I'm sure the rest of Cabinet would want to. And I just wonder where Acorn are tonight. They should be here to cheer us on and thank us for. Yeah, can't hear a thing. I don't know where they are. Yeah. Okay, does any other Cabinet member wish to speak? No, okay, in which case we'll move to Councillor Galvin. Councillor Galvin, would you care to ask your question, please?
Thank you. So the administration had previously said it can't predetermine landlord licensing for fear of legal challenge, which is understood. But predetermination is different from stating a principle. Can the Cabinet confirm whether it supports in principle expanded landlord licensing, including for smaller HMOs, where statutory criteria are met and the evidence supports it, and whether it's opposed even in those circumstances? Just for the record. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Though you know, we are committed to making sure tenants live in the private rent sector, live in safe, decent, affordable homes. We've committed to using our powers to improve standards, and that's why we commissioned this work, as I've discussed. I think, you know, I brought that motion, and I think that was a fairly strong commitment that I will do everything I can that is evidence-based to drive up standards in the private rented sector. I wouldn't have brought that motion to council. I wouldn't have brought previous updates. I think what I've just made clear is we have an evidence base. I will follow due process, and that is whatever it takes to drive up standards. And I think it's also a little bit narrow to say just commit to landlord licensing. I think I will state the principle that I will drive up standards in the private rental sector. I think that's a more important way to look at it, rather than wedding ourselves to one thing. If that is the way that it's going to support and is what is evidence-based, then we will discuss that. But we will discuss every tool, because we shouldn't be just talking about the one thing that is people shouting loudly about. We've got to talk about what works, and that is why we come back to the evidence base, why we've done the work we've done, and why I brought the motion I did. I think I covered that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Beth. And this is very much your project and your ongoing achievement. Not that there isn't further to go, of course, on the journey. Okay, we'll move straight to a vote then. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much, Rob. Item 10 is Planning Enforcement Report of Activity 24-25 and Enforcement Policy, and I will move the report. This report provides an overview of the Council's planning enforcement powers and the work undertaken over the last 5 years, with a more detailed focus on activity during 2024-25. It also seeks Cabinet's endorsement of a new planning enforcement policy to sit alongside the Council's corporate enforcement policy. It is important to be clear at the outset that planning enforcement is discretionary. Action is not taken where it is expedient and in the public interest. It is only taken where it is expedient and in the public interest. Not every technical breach justifies formal enforcement, and the Council must always act proportionately. The adoption of a dedicated planning enforcement policy will improve transparency around how decisions are made and help manage public expectations about what enforcement can do and cannot do. Over the past 5 years, the service has dealt with an average of around 195, that's 195 inquiries per year. These have covered a wide and varied range of issues, including changes of use, inappropriate advertisements, and works to listed buildings, amongst lots of other matters. Many of these cases have been resolved without the need for formal action, and the Council routinely seeks to achieve compliance through negotiation and persuasion, moving to formal notices or direct action only where justified and necessary. This approach reflects both national guidance and good practice and ensures enforcement powers are used responsibly. Following a successful growth bid, the planning enforcement team has expanded to 2 full-time equivalent officers, with a second enforcement officer joining in February 2026. In addition, the design and conservation team has provided extra capacity to deal with listed building and heritage-related enforcement cases. This strengthens the Council's ability to respond to more complex and sensitive breaches, particularly in conservation areas. Government guidance encourages local planning authorities to have their own enforcement plans, and the policy provides clear benefits. It clarifies what the Council will and will not investigate, sets out priorities, timescales and enforcement tools, and offers important legal protection by reducing the risk of costs and maladministration claims. Above all, it improves openness and consistency in how enforcement decisions are made. Adopting this policy will support the delivery of the Council's adopted planning policies, including the Greater Norwich Local Plan. It will reinforce public confidence that serious breaches are dealt with fairly and consistently, help manage reputational risk by demonstrating lawful and proportionate decision-making, and align enforcement activity with our wider objectives on climate, heritage, health and community safety. In conclusion, Cabinet is asked to note the planning enforcement activity undertaken during 2024-25 and to adopt the planning enforcement policy, providing a clear, transparent framework for future enforcement action. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jones, I saw first. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak on the item? No. Councillor Galvin will come to Group Leader questions. Would you please ask your question?
Thank you. The planning enforcement report shows a significant volume of complaints and cases over recent years, and residents often tell us that confidence in the planning system depends on enforcement being timely and visible. Can the Cabinet member confirm whether current staffing and resources are sufficient to deal with the scale and complexity of enforcement work, and whether additional investment would be considered if backlogs or delays are shown to undermine public confidence or environmental outcomes?
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. I will respond. There it is. Beg your pardon, I lost this page. Following a successful growth bid, the planning enforcement team has expanded to 2 full-time equivalent officers, with a second enforcement officer joining in February 2026. In addition, the design and conservation team now provides extra capacity to deal with listed building and heritage-related enforcement cases. This strengthens the Council's ability to respond to more complex and sensitive breaches, particularly in conservation areas. We're also introducing improved workflow systems and online forms to streamline how we handle inquiries and reduce the administrative burden on officers to enable a greater focus on service delivery going forward. The new arrangements will be allowed to bed in, and delivery of the service will be kept under review with close performance monitoring before undertaking any further structural changes. We will now move to vote. All those in favour, please.
Unanimous.
That's unanimous, thank you. Item 11 is a review and amendment of gambling statement of principles. I will move the report. I'm pleased to introduce this report concerning the updated Statement of Principles for Determining Gambling Applications, which has been prepared for consultation. As members will know, the Gambling Act requires every licensing authority to prepare and publish a Statement of Principles at least once every 3 years. Norwich City Council last adopted its statement in July 2023, and we are now approaching the point at which this policy must be reviewed and renewed ahead of July 2026. The Statement of Principles sets out clearly how this council, in its role as licensing authority, applies the Gambling Act. It guides operators and licence holders on how to apply for a licence, the conditions that may be attached, and the way in which gambling activities within our city are regulated. At its core, the policy aims to support responsible gambling while ensuring that the public, and particularly children and vulnerable people, are properly protected. A draft of the revised policy was considered by the Licensing Committee on the 4th of December, and members' comments from that meeting will be incorporated into the broader consultation process. We are now seeking Cabinet approval to begin a public consultation on the revised draft Statement of Principles, running from the 19th of January to the 15th of March 2026. Given that no major changes are proposed, this time frame is considered proportionate and appropriate. Following the consultation, a final version of the policy will be presented to full council for adoption. I commend the report to Cabinet and invite members to support the recommendation to proceed to consultation. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Padder, thank you. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak on the item? No. Okay, Councillor Galvin, move to you. Would you like to ask your question, please?
The Gambling Statement of Principles rightly recognises the need to balance economic activity with the protection of vulnerable people. As this consultation proceeds, can the Cabinet member confirm how the Council will ensure that evidence on gambling-related harm, particularly in more deprived communities, is actively used to shape policy, including the potential to apply stronger local protections where there's a clear link between clustering of premises and social harm?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Galvin. The Council recognises the importance of addressing gambling-related harm, particularly in areas where vulnerability and deprivation may be more prevalent. As part of this consultation, we will actively seek information on these vulnerabilities and engage with the police and other key stakeholders to gather their views and evidence. We're also updating the local area profile and mapping of gambling premises to ensure that any patterns of clustering linked to social harm are clearly identified and considered. Any findings from this process will be carefully considered and incorporated into the consultation analysis. Where significant evidence indicates the need for stronger local protections, we will make appropriate amendments to the policy to reflect those findings. Our aim is to ensure that the final Statement of Principles strikes the right balance between supporting economic activity and safeguarding those most at risk. Thank you. We'll now move straight to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Unanimous. Thank you, Rob. Item 12 is a review and amendment of pavement licensing policy. This all takes me back to when I had a licensing portfolio years ago, over a decade. I'll move the report. I'm introducing today's report concerning the Council's pavement licensing policy, which has been prepared for consultation. The pavement licensing system was first introduced through the Business and Planning Act 2020 to support businesses by simplifying the process for placing furniture, such as tables, chairs and barriers, on the public highway. Although originally intended as a temporary measure, the system has since been made permanent by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023. Norwich City Council, as a licensing authority, is responsible for issuing these licences and ensuring that any licensed use of the pavement is safe, accessible and well managed. The policy sets out how the Council administers the pavement licensing regime, how businesses apply, the fees, the conditions that may be attached, and how the licensed areas are monitored and regulated. The report presents proposed amendments to this policy so that it remains up to date, legally robust and aligned with the permanent national framework. The report proposes that pavement licences be issued with a standard duration of 2 years, unless there is a clear rationale for a shorter period. This will provide greater certainty for businesses while maintaining appropriate regulatory oversight. A draft of the revised policy was considered by the Regulatory Committee on the 4th of December, and members' comments from that meeting will be incorporated into the broader consultation process. This report seeks Cabinet approval to undertake a public consultation on the revised draft policy, with the consultation period running from the 19th of January to the 15th of March 2026. Following that process, a final version of the policy will be brought forward to Cabinet for adoption. I commend the report to Cabinet and invite members to support the recommendations to initiate consultation and to set out a clear, sustainable approach to pavement licensing for the city. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kidman, I saw first. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak? No. I'll therefore move to group leader questions. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Disability groups and national guidance are clear that minimum clear widths, step-free routes and consistent layouts are essential to ensure pavement licensing does not exclude disabled people, particularly wheelchair users and those with visual impairments. The revised policy sets out general accessibility principles but does not explicitly list some of these statutory or widely recommended measures. Can the Cabinet member explain why these specific protections are not set out more clearly in the policy, and how the Council will ensure robust enforcement to protect disabled people in practice rather than relying on complaints after harm has occurred?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Galvin. I will respond. The Council is committed to ensuring pavement licensing does not create barriers for disabled people, including wheelchair users and those with visual impairments. While the revised policy sets out overarching accessibility principles, we acknowledge the importance of clear practical measures such as minimum clear widths, step-free routes and consistent layouts. As part of the consultation process, we will engage with Inclusive Norwich and other relevant stakeholders to gather their views and recommendations. Any significant findings will be carefully considered and, where appropriate, amendments will be made to the policy to reflect these protections more explicitly. In terms of enforcement, the Council will continue to apply robust checks during the licensing process and monitor compliance proactively rather than relying solely on complaints. Our aim is to ensure that accessibility standards are upheld in practice and that public spaces remain inclusive for all. We'll now move straight to the vote. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you, Rob. And Leonie, I've got it in stereo that time. Let's move on to item 13, outcome of the scrutiny call-in of the IT infrastructure refresh. This is just an item for information. Item 14, approval of a landlord contract. Councillor Jones, back to you. Good work here. Would you care to move the report, please?
Thank you. One of my favourite topics, compliance. So, please move forward this report. The Council currently has a number of different services and maintenance contracts undertaking compliance inspections and associated repairs across our homes. To maximise the efficiency of these core services, we tender this work via a single-stage process, for which the approval of contract award is being sought tonight. And this, when we're talking about compliance, we're including things like electrical inspections, lighting, repairs and testing, ward and cool systems, fire and door inspections, there's ventilation, there's a whole long list of things, but I won't go through them all. This contract is developed to ensure that the services offered to our customers and communities delivered to high quality and standard service we expect while supporting our corporate strategies. As a portfolio holder, compliance is a really key priority for me, so I'm really pleased that we're bringing this. The new contract for landlord compliance is required to replace 2, as I've said, and the current one is due to expire at the end of March. By passing this tonight, we're ensuring the continuation of compliance inspections, servicing and repairs across the HRA asset portfolio and maintaining communal spaces around customers' homes to a high standard. That will do.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Padder, thank you very much. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak? First of all, on the above-the-line report. No. I'll then move to questions from group leaders. Councillor Galvin, would you please ask your question?
Thank you. It's clearly very important that essential services are compliant in communal areas and that these are effectively checked. Can you explain a bit more about how residents and caretakers' input will be built into this process? For example, what's the process for raising concerns in this area contractually? How is that built in?
So the contract change will not affect the way that customers and caretakers are able to report repairs and concerns and the way that these are actioned. This will continue. Reported repairs will continue to be logged and undertaken under this new contract or by NCSL within appropriate timescales. Caretakers are currently able to raise concerns through housing or property services staff for resolution. Further to this, property, housing and estates colleagues are developing a plan to undertake regular estate and communal space inspections. This is used to identify and action repairs, upgrades and estate improvements for our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak on the exempt appendix? No, in which case we'll move straight to a vote. All those in favour?
It's unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you very much. And thank you everybody, that is the conclusion of the meeting. Good night.